Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Odell, and you may remember me from luminescentphoto.com or other fun things, or maybe you've been on a trip with me in the past. But tonight we're talking about Croatia, and I'm excited to be here and share some of my photos from my trip to Croatia back in beginning of October. So it was a really fun trip, and we did some amazing photography and just mostly just went to an incredible country. So I'm going to be presenting this today. I'll give you a bit of background on Croatia, a little history, talk about some of the things to see there, and then I will spend a little time sharing my photos from Croatia from the trip we had, and talk about some of the places that we saw. And lastly, I'm going to close with what the experience was like, because we were doing a small ship cruise, and it was absolutely amazing. It was a very cool way to see Croatia, and highly recommended. And talk about that, and talk about a trip that could potentially participate in next summer. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. I'll start with extremely brief history of Croatia, because it's, as with all things in Europe and Eastern Europe, it's pretty complicated. So I'm going to keep this very, very top level. Here's Croatia. If you go on Google Maps and you look for it, Croatia is mostly a coastal region. Okay, and this region of the extreme coast was called Dalmatia, and then there was the interior region. And historically speaking, Croatia has been back and forth between its own kingdom, uh, city states, part of various empires along the way, going all the way back to the Roman times, uh, and then most recently part of Yugoslavia until it dissolved during the Civil War in the early 1990s. So what you see in the map today, you've got the coastal region and then the more interior region. And the interior region was traditionally the Kingdom of Croatia, and the coastal region was the Dalmatia or Dalmatian region. And back in Roman times, all the way going back to the 11th year BC through about the 5th century, so about 600 or sorry 400, it was under Roman control. Rome is not that far away from Italy, is not that far away from Croatia. It's just a jaunt across the Adriatic Sea. So Dalmatia is this coastal area, and it was comprised of many small city states. So you have a city that was its own independent entity, essentially. So not really a country as much as this aggregation of things. And in the early 1400s, it came under control of the Venetian Empire. So you'll hear about Marco Polo and other famous Venetian exploits and travels. And the Venetians controlled Croatia all the way up to the end of the 1700s. So for almost 400 years. So there's a really strong Venetian, northern Italy influence in Croatia. If you go there, it's not like other parts of maybe Eastern Europe that you might think. And the exception to this was the city of Dubrovnik, which remained an independent city state for most of this time. They kind of worked deals between the Venetians, and then the Ottomans were there. So this is all, if you go back to your ancient world history class in high school or college, this is stuff that you may or may not have even learned about. Now, at the end of the 1800s, Croatia joined the Austrian Empire, the Habsburgs, and that lasted until about World War One, when, well, they lost, right? So at that point, there was a brief part of a kingdom of Yugoslavia, and then formally became Yugoslavia, which is now multiple regions. So you've got Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Macedonia, all these places, Kosovo, those were all parts of what we grew up as learning as Yugoslavia. And that was part of the Eastern Bloc, the communist regime led by a guy named Tito, although Tito was kind of in between. You can read your history on him, but he wasn't hardcore like some of the rest of the Eastern Bloc was at that time. So Yugoslavia was kind of this in between country, but it was part of that communist nation group all the way through the Cold War. And then in 1992, there was a civil war. This is when everything went down, and we have what resulted in the current situation of the independent countries. So Croatia is just that interior region with its capital of Zagreb, and then the coastal region through the Dalmatian coast. It's really, really just a little strip of coastline. Kind of reminds me of geographically, kind of like Chile, where it's just a real thin coastal strip. So that's where it is. All right. So it's really not that far from Europe. Main what you would, it's about an hour flight or under 2 hours from Germany. Really not far at all. But there it is. So it's a place that many of us have heard about. Maybe we wouldn't know exactly where it was on a map. Now you know. So back in 2019, in the before times, I had been hearing about how great Croatia was, and my travel partner, Pat Hand, she runs Dancing Moon Travel, and she's helped me with the logistics and coordinating most of my international photography trips. She came to me and said, Jason, I found a really cool itinerary on a yacht to go, a passenger yacht, small number of cabins, to go along the Croatian coast, and maybe this would be something that would interest you. And I looked at the itinerary and I said, wow, that looks really cool. Let's put this together for the spring of 2020. And so we were all set for an April 2020 sailing. And then kind of what happened next, right? So we postponed this trip several times. And then finally, this past October, things were opened up enough, vaccines rolled out, and we were all in a good place. And so we pressed forward and went to Croatia. And we did a 7-night cruise from Split to Dubrovnik. I'll be talking about that briefly. And we had a few days on the front end extra to kind of get us acclimated. So I'll talk about all of that. But mostly I'm here to talk about the trip and share some photos. And I've got 1,500 pictures and I've only barely sorted through them, so it's pretty fun. But I went to Croatia back in October with 10 clients, and we were all on this small passenger yacht. And it's really kind of hard to call it a ship, but it was really, really nice. So this is the track log of the entire or almost the entire trip that I took, starting up here in Split, working our way to Trogir. We took land excursions up to a national park here, then down to Hvar, and then Vis, Korcula, Slano, little side trip to Stone, and then we ended in Dubrovnik. And then I took a side trip at the end up to Mostar, which is in Bosnia. And I don't have any pictures to share from that, but it's very cool too. I do have pictures. I just didn't put them in tonight's presentation in the interest of time. So we started in Split, and I'll just go through. I'm going to hit some photos from the major stops along the way. Not everything, not exhausting, but every place. Now Split is a major town. You can fly. In fact, we flew into Split, and Split goes back to Roman times. Split is coastal. It has a harbor. It was the retirement palace of the Roman Emperor Diocletian in the year roughly, I think, 306 AD. And for about 6 or 8 years after he, quote unquote, retired, or he resigned the emperorship of Rome, he lived there. He was from this region, and that's why he chose to retire there. And you can see there's a lot of palm trees. This is coastal Croatia has got a very Mediterranean climate. And so we were in Split. We started there, and we had a free day to kind of just recover from the plane flight. It's a long trip over there. And then we explored the areas around Split before boarding our ship. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So here is a panoramic shot of the town of Split. This tower here, I mentioned Venice. Well, this is that Venetian Empire architecture. The Palace of Diocletian is through here too. There's ancient Roman walls from, again, built in the year 300. So we're talking pretty wild there. And so this is the port. You can see there's a bunch of yachts docked here, as well as ferries and things like that. And then the main city extends up and down either side. Now, I took a little side trip on my own before meeting up with our clients, and this is um, the fortress of Klis, and it's just outside of uh, of Split. So we took an Uber. It's about 20 minutes ride. Really cool. You can walk all through this fortress, and this was built in the 1500s, again during the Venetian times. So all the stone fortification, and there's lots of granite and limestone in Croatia that you'll see things built from. Then we explored the town, the old town, and Diocletian's palace proper. So here's a shot that we got in Diocletian's palace, and I have to give props to my client, Jim Knighton. Jim, I think you're here. Um, Jim found this little room, and then we noticed if we went back to the back corner, this is the Roman construction here in the front, and here's that Venetian church tower in the background. And we had a beautiful late afternoon sunset light here in Split this evening before we got on board our ship. Walking through the old town of Split, there's lots of photo opportunities. You've got this old architecture, but instead of being in ruins, most of it's in pretty good shape. Really never got destroyed. I mean, the Roman stuff is pretty old, but the stuff dating back to the 16th, 17th, 18th century is still pretty intact, and there's shops just right in there. So lots of lamps and windows and doorways and stonework, all kinds of stuff that you can photograph if you are in Split, Croatia. Here's sort of the main square. They've got open dining outside, lots of outdoor dining. There's architecture that even shows a little bit of Muslim influence. And there was even Jewish areas in Split. So there was a Jewish population. So this is all in the old city of Split. And we had a really beautiful sunset in the main square in the old town of Split. So we got on the ship, and I'll talk about that at the end, more about what that's like. And then we set sail. After our first day, we had one more evening in Split on board, and we had a tour the next morning. And then we sailed. And our ship, the way these little yacht cruises work in Croatia is that they sail in the morning and come into port middle of the day or late afternoon. And then you've got the entire late afternoon and evening, and including overnight, to do your own thing. Well, oftentimes we had a guided tour that might have run for about an hour, a walking tour, and then we could just explore on our own whatever we wanted to do. So our first stop was the town of or city of Trogir, and it's also on mainland. So here's Split, and we just kind of went around the corner, and we stopped and docked in Trogir. And here we explored the town, but also we took a bus ride up to Krka National Park, which you can see where these lakes are at. And there were some absolutely incredible waterfalls there that we photographed. So here's the town of Trogir. And again, you can see that Venetian architecture. This is the Croatian flag we've got in the foreground. So you get used to its own flavor of red, white, and blue. And these symbols on top of the flag represent some of the regions and kingdoms that all merged to form Croatia. Lots of opportunities in the old town for doing detailed close-up work. cool windows, colors, stonework, textures. We had some wonderful side lighting here. Great stuff. Just doing a little photo walk through the city of, or I should say, town of Trogir. Little alleyways. Lots of people have flowers and plants. I mean, this is somebody's house. This is like their apartment, and this is the ruins, And just think about that. That's really cool. Again, that Venetian architecture on a wonderful morning in Trogir. This is by the not too far from where we docked. And then we took that bus ride to Krka National Park, which was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just this land of waterfalls. It was absolutely incredible. And so we did a little handheld, longish exposure photography at this park. It was a little bit of an overcast day, but that was perfect for photographing the waterfalls. So this was just one of about 4 or 5 stops where we could uh, do some photography in the national park. It was just gorgeous to see this area. After spending the night in Trogir, we then moved on to Hvar. And with one of these things with the letters, you get to learn pronounce all these things with multiple consonants. It's kind of crazy. Now, Hvar is a pretty cool town. I'll show you where it is on the map. So we sailed from Trogir. This is my track log from my GPS through here, and here is Hvar. So you can take a ferry from Split to either Starograd or Hvar. But it was nice that we were on our own boat because we didn't have to schlep our luggage around. Hvar is absolutely gorgeous. I can't even describe, and we had amazing late afternoon light, just incredible port. This is the town itself. We were docked not too far here over on the left-hand side where we were in port. Lots of little shops, lots of places to eat, and lots of Venetian era architecture. The little mini marina, lots of little boats were in there in the town of Hvar itself. So a lot of times these islands, they will be named. The island is Hvar, and then the main town will have the same name as the island, so they call it Hvar Town. Again, you can see that Mediterranean architecture really coming through the red sort of Spanish tile roofs and the limestone construction. This was on our photo walk. Lots of statues to the various patron saints that they had that were memorialized in these towns. Seems like every town had one particular patron saint that was prominently displayed. So Hvar was amazing. I had ice cream there, or I should say gelato, priorities. Um, but and then we continued to the island and the town of Vis. Now Vis is interesting because it was pretty much off limit. So here's Hvar. We sailed to Vis, and we went around and docked right here. And so we had a day in Vis. Now, normally we would have gone out this way to a place called the Blue Caves. Unfortunately, the winds came up and it was just too rough to even attempt to enter it. So we went with Plan B and we went directly to Vis. Now, Vis was an island of military importance back in World War II. And in fact, for the most part, all through the time that Croatia was part of Yugoslavia, foreign nationals could not get to Vis. It wasn't an option. And the big story here was that in World War II, the leader Tito fled from the mainland and hid in a cave on this island, which we actually visited for several months um, during 1943 or 44. I kind of forget. I think it was 1944. The Nazis, the Germans were bombing, and they were trying to get him, but they didn't get him. And strategically speaking, it was kind of interesting. The Allies had a deal with Yugoslavia in which we had an air base here. It was an emergency landing air base. So Allied planes like B-17s and B-24s and whatever, if they needed to make an emergency landing, they were running low on fuel, they could land here safely on this island, get fixed up, and then fly home safely. So Vis was really, really nice. We pulled into port right through here. You can see here's one of the ferries, but we were, our ship, which you can't see, is down here. You can see them tethered together. We came in just as the church bells were ringing at high noon at the church here. There's a cemetery. You could go walk around this area. Most of us chose to do a tour of the island because we had extra time. So we booked a bus, a small van, just for us, and it wasn't terribly expensive. And we took this bus tour, and they took us up to where the military base was with the radars and stuff, and we got to hike up to where Tito's cave was. It literally was just a cave. There wasn't much in it. There's a plaque, not a plaque, but a carving there. And then we went from Vis to this other side of the island to the small fishing village of Komisa, and I'm probably not saying it right, but Komisa was really neat to explore. We were there kind of at the tail end of the season, so it wasn't particularly crowded with tourists. But again, lots of little shops, lots of back alleyways. This was a bunch of us walked down and we found this area. So this is looking back. Our ship that we docked at was well, we didn't dock; it was on the other side. But where our bus dropped us off, this blue van was our bus, and then we went around. So it was a really easy walk, lots of really cool stuff to explore. Here's the church that we got to in Komitsa. And you would see scenes like this, the old buildings, people hanging their laundry out to dry. Uh, Green shutters was very common. We continued on from Vis. We actually went to this. And we were going to go to another place that we weren't able to get into another national park, so we went directly to this town and island of Korcula. Um, and this was an incredible place. This was the view we got coming in. There's Korcula. You can see again the classic red tile Spanish roofs. It's got 16th century fortress. A lot of this was established even earlier than that, of course, during medieval times. And story has it, legend has it, that Marco Polo came through here on the return of his journey. In fact, may have even been imprisoned here due to some conflicts between the Croatians and the Venetians. That's debatable, but it's an amazing town that dates back to the 13th, 14th century and beyond. Again, you can see the palm trees and stuff. So we did a city walk, a little photo walk in the middle of the day, and scouted locations. And we had a tour from our guide on board our ship. She gave an amazing tour, lots of history. This is the clock in the town square, and then these ruins go back practically to Roman times, very old. Some of these churches were again built well before the 1500s, even earlier. So just a really rich environment for doing travel photography if you like stonework and old history. So I mentioned that we didn't have to sail at night. So one of the things we were able to do with our group was we could go out at sunset. And so we did. We weren't locked into any particular itinerary. Dinners were on our own. And frankly, most of us were too full after the four-course lunch they served aboard the ship. So we were just fine with this. So here's the sunset at Korčula, looking back, and we were in the harbor. And then we did a little twilight shooting with our tripods. the old city fortress at night. It was pretty windy, but we made it work. After we had another stop along the way. I don't have a tremendous number of photos from, but it was still cool. We stopped in the town of Stone. We had a tour of that town, and we got to eat the local oysters, which were amazing. But then we ended up in Dubrovnik, and Dubrovnik is the really famous city in Croatia these days because of Game of Thrones, which a lot of it was filmed there. So here's the walled city of Dubrovnik again. These walls were constructed during the 1500s. Dubrovnik maintained itself as an independent city state. It was they built the fortress because you had the Ottoman Empire on one side, you had the Venetians on the other, and they worked a little deal and they made sure. And so they managed to stay independent and hostility free for the most part during this time. And even when Croatia was part of the Venetian Empire, Dubrovnik remained independent as his own city state. So here's the walls, here's its little harbor. We actually docked clear on the other side because there wasn't a port big enough for anything. The cruise ships can come to Dubrovnik. It's got a large harbor on the opposite side of it, but you can see the blue sea of the Adriatic. Just it was so clear. The water was wonderfully clear. Just a beautiful place to go. And we did photo walks there. And we had the first afternoon, and then we disembarked, and we had a second day there. So this is looking out the old cannons over the old city. And here was, which I thought was really cool. You have buildings built inside the walls. So here's an old church in Dubrovnik. It's built inside the city walls. You have this walled city. Everything is contained. It's not very big, but it's tremendously rich with places to explore and tons of places to eat. You get your gelato, your priorities straight. You can have a beer or whatever on the city streets in Dubrovnik. Those of you who watch Game of Thrones may recognize this particular location. The fact that there was nobody on these steps was frankly quite amazing, but we were out there during a slow day. When the cruise ships come into port, Dubrovnik can get very, very full. But this is where the famous walk of shame in Game of Thrones happened, coming down these steps. There's lots of opportunities to find things to photograph other than the wide shots. So our photo group, we focused on looking for detail shots to go along with the wide shots. Here's the interior of a church in Dubrovnik, the altar. And this is, again, looking back at the walled city. And this is, if you are a Game of Thrones person, this area right here is the King's Landing. That's where they filmed that scene. And some areas around it. Very, very cool. You can see how clear the water is. It's just amazing. Okay, so I don't even have to begin to tell you that I have way more photos than what I showed you, but Croatia is just truly incredible. It's an amazing place. Felt very safe the whole time. Most of the people in the shops speak English because tourism is their number one economic driver. That's where they have most of their economy from. And so they're very reliant on folks coming from the US, Canada, and more recently places like Germany to visit. So a lot of these people working in the restaurants could speak English, German, Croatian, you name it. So I want to tell you a little bit about if you wanted to go to Croatia, what you got to do to get there, and what you can expect when you get there. So how do you get to Croatia? It's not really that hard. It's just a little far. So depending on where you're going into, and you have some choices, you can fly into Zagreb if you want to visit the capital, which is something I didn't do, but it would be very interesting. You can fly to Split, you can fly to Dubrovnik, in and out. And most of those cities are served by one of the major European hubs. So Frankfurt, Munich, or London Heathrow. Most of us on the trip uh, flew through Frankfurt. I think actually Amsterdam can get you there too. So just depending on where your connection is. So depending on where you're flying from, in most cases, you can actually get to Croatia with just a single stop. You can fly from a major city to Frankfurt or Munich, and then one stop later, you're in Croatia. It's a long day, but it's not a lot of changing of planes. Now, Croatia is in the Central European time zone, so that's UTC or Greenwich time +1. So it's an hour ahead of London time. So it's in the same time zone as most of Europe, including Germany, France, and even Spain. It's in that time zone. Now, if you do choose to go, uh, I always recommend getting there a day before you've really planned anything. Sometimes there'll be trips where it'll say, okay, we'll pick you up from the airport and you get in at whatever time, and then, oh my gosh, you're hitting it that very same day or even the very next day. We all arrived. Most of us got in the late afternoon, and so we budgeted in a full free day in Split before we even got on the boat. This enabled us to just get our bearings, enjoy some time to get our stuff together, enjoy the food, explore Split a little bit on our own before getting onto the boat. So, with any major travel to Europe, that extra day, or at least getting in on a day where you don't have to jump on a tour, even if you're getting in the morning, really highly advisable. It's worth the extra hotel night, in my opinion, because you'll be a lot more coherent the next day when it's time to actually get going. Now, what we did, and I want to talk about, is this yacht tour of Croatia, because it's a really interesting and unique way of getting around. There's lots of ways to see Croatia. You can go into Zagreb, you can do a land tour, you can go by bus to different places, you can take ferries, but the luxury yacht was, in my opinion, an absolutely stellar way of seeing Croatia. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Um, this was unique, and like I said at the beginning of the talk, uh, this appealed to me. Cruises are fun and they're great vacations, but they don't always work out for photography. And that's not because you don't go to anywhere interesting, it's more because of the timing. So a small ship cruise is really cool because it's nothing like a traditional ocean cruise on a, several thousand passenger ship. These are small vessels. They're like 150 feet long, maybe more, but under 200 feet. Most of these only carry 20, 30, maybe 40 passengers. That's it. Some of these will have 20 to 25 cabins tops, some even less than that. And because you're on this smaller vessel, you can get to places that would otherwise be not even something on your itinerary on a big cruise. So places like Vis and Korcula and Hvar, these are towns that and Stone. These are towns that the big ships just straight up don't go to because there's nowhere for them to berth. There's nowhere for them to be. So you can go to these small places, and again within and like any cruise, you unpack one time, right? You're on the boat. You're there for 7 nights. You do not have to worry about dragging your luggage through cobblestone streets to get to a ferry or something like that. So this was really good. So we got to see some places that you just wouldn't have gone to um, without complicated ferry schedules. And then I alluded to this earlier, but we docked overnight, and that meant we had free access to go on and off the boat as long as you were back on by the next morning, because believe me, they took off on time. They didn't waste any time. So if you, as long as you were out there, if you wanted to go on a bender in Korcula, I suppose you could have done that. But as long as you got back on the ship by by usually 7 in the morning the next day, you're good to go. Most of our guided tours took place in the afternoon, leaving us to free time to eat, to find something to eat if we were hungry. Again, like I said, you probably won't be, but you can free form your dinner, and then we can explore towns during the best times for photography. Which, if you go on a trip like this with a vacation mindset, you're great. I mean, it's all good. But if you go on it with a little bit of a, I want to get a few nice pictures too, being able to shoot at sunset and at twilight, in that blue hour, really can be the difference between coming back with just snapshots and coming back with photographs from your vacation, like real interesting photographs, more than just snapshots that you would get with your phone. So that was a real exciting part of these itineraries that I really, really enjoyed. And so I highly recommend it. Here's on board the ship. This was my cabin. Did not suck. Very nice. In fact, the cabins on these small ships were pretty much bigger than the cabins that you'd have on most cruise ships. The bathroom was certainly larger. I never felt claustrophobic at any time. Here was the dining area deck, and there was a bar, and we could go and they, beer and wine, whatever you wanted, and we'd have breakfast here every day, kind of a buffet, and then we'd have a four-course gourmet, just amazing lunch every single day. What's the food like in Croatia? Very Mediterranean, Italian. So if you like pizza and seafood and pasta and mussels and things like that and gnocchi, you are good to go. But of course they have all kinds of other things. Um, they have a national dish called black risotto. It's risotto that is black because of squid ink. It actually tastes good. It's a little briny, but it tastes really good. Of course, you can get your fill of gelato at any number of places where you stop. And the ship took care of everybody. They had vegetarian options, so if you had dietary constraints, they worked with us to make sure everybody was well fed. And believe me, we were well fed. So here's my prawn gnocchi that I had the first night in Split, and a selection of other kinds of things. There's your black risotto, and sesame crusted blackened. I think that was pork. I can't remember. And of course, your gelato. So if this sounds interesting, which hopefully it did, Dancing Moon Travel, of which I am an independent contractor, has put together a charter to go to Croatia and do a similar itinerary, 7-night itinerary aboard the Adriatic Dream in 2022. Now, this is unique because we have booked the entire boat for our clients. And so there's only about 10 cabins left. This is not a big ship. It holds, I think, 25 or 30 people max. We've got 10 cabins available if you want to join this tour. This tour will be 7 nights from the 27th of August through September 4th, from Split to Dubrovnik. There are optional extensions. We got a couple of days extension on the front end starting in Zagreb if you're interested in that. And then we're working on putting together some back end extensions, probably to Bosnia and Herzegovina, like Mostar, where I mentioned. Now, this is a cruise, adventure event. However, I have been asked to offer a photo workshop as part of this tour if there is enough interest. So if there are 6 interested individuals or more, I will join this sailing as a photo guide, and I will offer my expertise on travel photography, on post processing, on how to turn your pictures into photographs during this sailing. So we've got this opportunity. It is absolutely going to sell out very quickly. So if you're interested in going, the only way to book it right now is to call directly to Pat Hand, who's the owner of Dancing Moon Travel, and she will book you.